Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Sowetan Women's Club. My name is Nwabisa Makunga, editor of the Sowetan. We're really privileged today. We're having a conversation that we believe as a brand, as a Sowetan brand, is really, really close to our hearts. We even had a whole campaign around it. It's about knowing your place. Everybody has always told you, you must know your place, sit in a corner, behave. You can dream, but not too much. You can aim, but not too high. And today we're talking to a group of women who flip the script and really embody everything that we believe as a Sowetan that we can achieve. But before we go to today's topic, there's something really kind of weighing in my heart today. And I really want to talk to you guys as our members and everybody watching us. And it's about the death of a woman, another woman in South Africa this week. Kwasa was 19 years old. She had a relationship with a man. She wanted to end it, a choice that she ought to have been able to make, completely her right. She refused to take no for an answer. And so he stabbed her and killed her. What does disturb me about it, apart from the death of a young woman, another young woman in South Africa, is really that unlike many other women, she did not keep quiet. She raised the alarm before. We always speak to women and tell them, speak out, raise the alarm. And she did. She consulted his family, and told them what had happened. And they told her to go back to him for her safety, so that nothing happens to her. What disturbs me about this is precisely that. It's precisely because as people, as families, as communities, we create an environment where perpetrators of violence can just be themselves, where they're allowed to do the most heinous things to the lives of women and young women and able to get away with it because they themselves can be. And I want to urge you today, if you belong to this club or not, if you're a member or not, if you are just a South African, we need to do better. We need to do right by our communities. We need to do right by women, by young women. A life was taken away unnecessarily so, but because people did not act right, did not come into the party to help out, and she's now no more. I urge you today, we need to do better. So our topic is about knowing our place. And I want to play a little video for you before I introduce you to my guests. And it's really a video which kind of encompasses everything about this campaign. And it shows, I think a lot of you probably would have seen it on all our platforms. Can I ask the team to play the video for us? Welcome back. Know your place, own it, and live it. I want to introduce you to my guests. Ellen Fischat is the founder of Story Room, a social enterprise that designs social innovation programs. She has extensive experience in small business development with a focus on social enterprises and technology. Hello, Ellen.
Hello, Nwabisa.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm excited about getting to the nitty-gritty of difficult conversations that we actually need to have.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. Our next guest is Nozibele Mrs. Mayaba. She is an HIV AIDS activist, a self-published author, and she is the South African International Youth Committee Ambassador and an active member of the International Youth Forum. Hi, Nozi.
Hi, Nwabisa. Thank you so much for having me.
Kunjan.
I'm good, thank you. I'm feeling good and I'm excited to be part of this.
Thank you so much for joining us. Our next guest is Lusanda Raphulu, who is an established South African lawyer specializing in labor law. She is a partner at Bowman law firm here in Johannesburg. She is, and at times has sat basically in the labor court as an acting judge. Lusanda, how are you doing, Siswa?
I'm well. How are you? Thank you for having me today.
I'm good. Thank you so much. So ladies, what I want to do today is really, we've introduced our topic, is really about knowing our place. It's at any given point in our lives, as people, as women especially, we've been told, sit in a corner, know your place, behave. You can dream and not too much. You can aim but not too high. This is where you basically are allowed to go, and this is how far you are allowed to go. And a lot of you, in fact, all of you on this chat have basically flipped that script. And you said, yes, you know your place, and your place is really at the head of the table, in whatever kind of spaces that you occupy, in whatever rooms that you occupy. And I'd like us to start with you, Ellen, and just tell us a little bit about your journey, what you do, what inspires it, and in particular, when it comes to how you assist, in making women, marginalized women, employable.
Thank you, Nwabisa. So I've got a long story. I'll try and stick to my 60-second pitch. So I'm a social worker by profession. I studied social work, and I actually came back to South Africa. So my parents left at the beginning of the 80s, and they went into exile in the Netherlands. And I came back at the ripe age of 30, deciding I want to give back. I want to understand where I come from, and I want to give back to my country. So I came back to PE. That was where I was born. And I started doing social work there. And in the community that I worked in, I realized that people didn't seem to be progressing because they just didn't know a lot. So the access to information, in my opinion, was like the biggest barrier for people being able to improve themselves. I also saw that the model of me driving around town trying to get donations to feed people was not a sustainable one. And I thought, if we're going to change this, the change needs to come from within ourselves and our own strengths. And that's how I moved into social enterprise. So in the communities, I started bartering with the women, with the boys' home that I ran, negotiating. You clean the street, you come to our information sessions, you come to our computer lessons. You need to know about the internet. You need to have an email address. That's as simple as how it began. That's how you're going to understand what sort of opportunities there are in the world. And basically from that story, I moved by pure chance actually into tech and innovation. By pure chance, but also because I realized that it almost seemed like a magical place where success happened, where all these people were incredibly clever and they made a lot of money and they spoke this language that I didn't understand, but I realized that was where opportunity laid. And I also wanted to understand what made them so special. So I basically elbowed my way and cried my way into my career of being where I am. And that's really being taking technology and innovation to the people. And I am biased. I have a preference in working for women and with women and our youth. And I believe that is simply because they are the best project managers that you could find. Women manage multiple tasks and budgets and programs, whether they're unemployed, to be able to feed your family every day without having a job and being financially dependent is an incredible skill and talent. So if we can hone that talent and develop that talent, then I think at the end of the day, we create a better environment and community for all of us. So my journey was not necessarily planned. I didn't, decide 15 years ago I was going to go into technology and innovation. But I did realize that being in the space where I was kept me small. And it kept me away from opportunities. And I've made it my life's mission now to go into communities and to teach people what technology is about and how they can access it, and how you don't need to have a computer science degree to be part of this gig economy, and you can do it from the comfort of your home and create a better living for yourself and for your family.
Thank you so much for that. Nozi, what Ellen says, one of the things that I kind of pick up as quite important from what she says is the value of information. Now, you've written an entire book basically on your life. And I think just, beyond just kind of writing the book, I think for you, probably you wanted to really share your story. Tell us a little bit about what your story and really what it means and what inspired you to write it.
So I was born in Port Elizabeth, born and bred in Port Elizabeth. I am the second and the last born, the only girl. And kind of felt like, so growing up, we're very, I'll say underprivileged. We were raised by a single mom. She worked as a cleaner for 29 years. So really struggling to afford the basic necessities. Education was quite a struggle. Attending a school that was under-resourced, lack of resources, sharing books, broken chairs, broken windows. But it was instilled from that early age still that the value of education is something that was, very important. So throughout my whole life, all I wanted to do was to make sure, I get educated. How that was going to happen, I did not know. But sort of making sure that I get educated so that I can look after my family. And I did that, matriculated when I was 16 years old. I went to varsity. I got my first degree, I think I was 21. And I thought of
I'm not sure if it's on my side. All right, I think we may have lost Nozi, but we'll try and get it back in a second. In the meantime, Lusanda, if I may just bring you in here. Partner at a law firm. How did that journey start?
So for me, it started at university. I did a social science degree, and I had 3 majors. I majored in law and marketing and economics. And I just enjoyed the law part more. I've always been interested in justice. I enjoyed the case law. So after that, I then did an LLB at Wits. So I did my undergrad at the University of Natal. I'm from Durban. And then after that, I moved to Johannesburg and I did my LLB at Wits. I then started articles at Bowman's in 2004. It's the only place I've ever worked. And I grew through the ranks, and I was appointed as a partner in March 2012. And I was then appointed as the head of the employment and benefits practice at Bowman's in March 2019.
I'm going to ask you a question, Lusanda, that you may find awkward. And the question is, what do you think set you apart? So you had the dream, you decided, I'm going to work, as hard as you did. But what do you think really in that journey of yours actually sets you apart?
I think one of the things that sets me apart is I don't try to conform. I actually like being myself and I don't try to conform. And I don't believe that the best way to make it is to look at the people who've made it and make yourself like them. I really believe in the power of diversity. I believe in the power of being in a room and bringing different ideas and bringing different perspectives. So I think for me, that's one of the things that sets me apart. As women, as a Black woman, for me, I think that's one of the things that sets me apart in that, bringing a different voice, bringing a different perspective. Yeah.
Nozi, we seem to have lost you there, but I see you back. Lusanda speaks about not conforming. Your entire life is literally about not conforming. Do you wanna carry on just with your thoughts before we got cut off?
Yeah, no, I was just saying while I was in that path, of now finding myself, and very randomly at work, I was at work and during a Wellness Day campaign, I found out that I was HIV positive. I was diagnosed HIV positive. You can imagine, obviously, it was a shock because at the time I'd only been, sexually active with one person. It was the first time. So me being diagnosed HIV positive was just ridiculous. So for the last 7 years, trying to deal with that very privately. By privately meaning that I did not tell anyone. I did not tell my family. I did not, because there is a certain perception of how my life should look like, particularly as a woman. This shouldn't have happened. I'm educated. I should have known better. How could I let this happen? And all of those things. So for the last 7 years, having to deal with that privately was quite a challenge in its own. And eventually getting to a better place. And I thought to myself, how many more of me that are going through something similar? I do not want, I'll be very honest though, that I do not want to be in this position where I will have to write a book about my own life. But I knew this is way bigger than I am. This is way bigger than what I think it is. So my book is basically based on that. Growing up, very disadvantaged, going through all that path, to being diagnosed HIV positive and having to work through that.
You've traveled the world basically when you worked for Ubuntu previously, and you've traveled the world really, kind of doing some good work and telling the story of South Africa and raising funds for people who, in the community in which you worked. Tell us what it is that mentally has to happen to a young woman who comes from a setup like yours, kind of being on world stages and saying to people, we have something to give, come assist us in walking this journey.
So it actually all started when I think it was about 11 or 12. So you can imagine for a little girl that is growing up in a township, as I've said, with lack of resources, your mindset thinks that the world ends there. The world ends at you, attending a school across the street and coming back home. The world ends at attending a university like 2 streets away and coming back home. And everything kind of happens like just around you. So I got an opportunity to be part of a cultural exchange program when I was 11, 12 years old. And it started off as a pen pal program. And then eventually they were like, oh no, you're actually going to New York. And you're going to meet some of the participants that you were writing to. And going to New York at 11 or 12, I'm so grateful for that opportunity, because that's how it opened my mind in terms of the world actually does not end in Maklagi. The world does not end in New Bright. The world does not end in Port Elizabeth. There's a far wider world that I want to experience. I mean, they had a whole program for us, going to the UN, meeting Kofi Annan's wife, doing all sorts of activities, and getting to see a different world that I didn't even know that it existed. So from then on, I was like, I am not ending in Port Elizabeth. I am definitely going beyond. So when I got the opportunity to work for Ubuntu, so it's an international NGO, they have 2 fundraising offices in New York and in London, and having to stand in front of 450 people, 550 people, and telling them about the work that we're doing back home, it was an honor, but a challenge itself. Because one, obviously, 50%, I'll say, of our organization is American, right? And one of the things that I wanted to bring into the table is I am responsible to tell my story. I am responsible to tell my story in my own way. So having someone, for a long time, it was a culture where someone from overseas will come to South Africa, look at what is wrong, and then go back overseas and tell it how they saw it. And I had a problem with that for quite some time, that how can someone who is not from South Africa, who's not from Africa, yet start, talking about as if, they are from South Africa. I was the one who was born here. So I took it as that challenge where I have a right to be there. Yes, it was a challenge. Yes, it was an eye-opener, but I thoroughly enjoyed it because I knew I represented, I was talking about something that was very close to home. I was talking about something that I experienced when I talk about children, being raised by single mothers, children not having resources, child-headed households, not having basic necessities. It's not something that was far-fetched. It's something that I was speaking about personally.
Ellen, what Nozi speaks about for me is really kind of broadening, one's mind outside of the immediate space and the immediate circumstances. And I think that's really kind of part of the work that you do, to empower people, particularly in STEM areas. Just tell us what that process has kind of taught you about people, about women, especially marginalized women, especially, our ability and also our thirst, basically, to move beyond, our current circumstances.
Going back to what Nozi said, when you described it, I was so happy that you told me when you went on this trip and you said like how your mind opened. And for me, being, a South African woman, but raised in the Netherlands, I admit I also came back to South Africa wanting to give back of all this wonderful things I had learned. And then I worked in a community, and I actually left social work because of that, because of the trauma you experience by not being able to effectively serve the community that you're trying to serve, because the problems are just so ginormous. And the social enterprise I then started, and so I'm very happy to hear you saying I don't believe that people can't grow beyond what they don't see. So as long as you're kept in a certain space, as long as you're told this is where you sit, this is how the world works, maybe in PE, if you're lucky, you'll go from New Brighton once a year, when is it 1st of January or Boxing Day, you'll go to the beach. And for me, it was a crazy idea that someone lived 20 minutes away from the beach and they went there once a year. Or when we took the community with us, that there were people that had never been to the beach. I could not imagine that. So what I do within technology, or why I promote STEM, is because as much as people say that science and technology and innovation is something of the future, it's not. It's happening now. It's not something that we should be aspiring to. And as long as we are still trying to, or the clever people around us are still trying to figure out what that future looks like for us, my mission is really to open up the eyes of people like a Nozi. So I work with a huge amount of women that we work in like the STEM programs that I support and that I run with. It's to say, girl, this is outside of this. This is what the world actually looks like. And you are best served being in this very uncomfortable space. But I promise you, we've got 1,000 women in South Africa that knows how difficult it is to sit at that table, but we will help you decipher the information. Big companies actually need your input, because solutions cannot be developed without your participation and knowledge. And if we allow them to do that, they're going to build systems, solutions that don't serve us, that are actually biased towards us, that are not made for us. So this oppression that is experienced, I think, by all women all over the world, and some of us even more so, needs to be addressed within those companies. And we do that by, so what it's taught me, it's encouraged me, because I'm a social worker, as I said, but I've learned about technology. I've learned that knowledge, I can teach myself anything. And thank goodness for the University of YouTube. There is nothing on this earth that you cannot learn. So, for example, with the outreach work that is supposed to support STEM initiatives, I will say, use your data to teach yourself something. Don't be looking at other people's Instagram posts of, using your data for worlds that they're only actually visiting at the mall. Use that data to teach yourself a skill. And the beauty about technology is that it doesn't have physical boundaries. All of my clients are international, but I sit at the southern tip of Africa. So once you understand that, no one can stop you.
You know what's interesting for me, Ellen, is that a lot of women Black women in particular, are always kind of told that, you know, in some sort of generic way, it's not our thing. So technology is not really kind of our thing, you know, and then you groomed sort of in a schooling system, at least in our time, perhaps not now, but you groomed in a schooling system that kind of says you're not fully equipped to do this kind of thing. And there's a difference between not being able to do something and not really being given an opportunity to do something and, you know, an opportunity to learn. So maybe I'd like you to comment on how really do women, marginalized women, young women, really kind of overcome that mentally. The idea that that they're not necessarily equipped, you know, in some sort of twisted generic way, you know, to go into these areas.
I think that's a life task on its own, because it's not only the young girls, it's ourselves. I mean, my age, yes, I grew up in the Netherlands. I grew up very privileged with all sorts of opportunities. That's why I could come back and decide to give back, or whatever it was I thought I was going to do. But my parents are South African. So at home, we maintained a South African upbringing, you know. So my brothers didn't have to do the dishes, but we had to as girls, and we had to dish up their food. And what you're taught at home and within your family is not always the same as what you when you're out in, you know, in business or in a different environment. So a lot of it, I think that change comes about when we as women support each other, when you're ready to say, actually, Nwabisa, how does this work? I don't understand. And where as women, I don't say, what, you can't code, or what, you don't know. I think that what men do very well is that they understand what power comes out of their unity. So even if they fight with each other for the sake of this deal, or for the sake of looking big and better, they'll work together. And women, even adult women, South African women, I think any woman over the age of 10, basically in South Africa, has been oppressed. And if it's not in her own family, then it's in her partner's family maybe, or her brother who's told by a grandfather. So I think, you know, I don't want to be negative and say it's impossible, but it starts with reaching out to the person next to you. It starts with reaching out to the cousin that we always make fun of, who maybe didn't finish school, who's only interested in fashion. Why aren't you teaching her how she can go onto an e-commerce platform? Anyone who buys fashion, doesn't matter where you are. It starts with understanding, with the will to uplift each other. And I think that we do this so naturally because we already in our communities, you know, we cook together, we have to make Sunday lunch together, we have to wash the dishes together. If we could use those moments, and when women such as Lusanda or yourself or Nozi, that's why it's so important. Girls need to see girls that look like us. I never saw anyone growing up who looked like me. I still don't see them on stages that look like me. And I can see with young colored girls, and there's still very few of them. That's also a whole different discussion on its own, why there are so few colored women in tech and more black women in tech. But you need to see someone who sounds like you do, who comes from the same area, who's been on a taxi, who's had your struggle. And the more we actually step forward without oppressing another woman in the process, but the more we say, come girl, you can shine, come, let me tell you the secrets. I think if we can do that, then we are literally the role models for our younger generation. They need to see it to know that that's where they can get to.
Absolutely. Lusanda, Ellen speaks about the importance of representation. And I think about, you know, the workplace, so the South African workplace at any given point. So we always talk about how, you know, our laws are very progressive in ensuring that women are, you know, kept space and all of that. But if you look at surveys that are done, it's very, very difficult for women, particularly Black women, to actually rise to positions of power and influence in corporate South Africa. Why do you think that is the case?
I mean, I think you're right that, you know, our laws on paper are very progressive. You know, we've got the Employment Equity Act, we've got affirmative action. So on paper and looking at our laws, we should see diversity throughout our workplaces. But yes, there are those difficulties in seeing people actually progress and make it. And I think to what Ellen said, I think representation is so important, it's vital. Not only for seeing people who look like you and sound like you and come from places that where you come from and speak Zulu like you and think, oh, is, you know, someone, a Zulu girl just like me is in a space like this, but also just to have people that you can go to and talk to about your challenges, so that you are able to get through the challenging times, because there will be challenging times. And if I just look at the space that I work in, you know, when we see our trainees, there's actually a large number of women. It's like 50-50 men and women. But when you look where people get to partnership, the women numbers are much, much lower. So what happens from the beginning of the journey to becoming a partner, becoming an executive, whatever space that you are in? When the challenges come, you know, where do you get your support from? So for me, it's, you know, it's having the support, it's having the people who can back you, who can speak about you, who can say positive things about you in important rooms. So for me, it's that, it's having the representation and having the support. The law can give you the access to come in through the door, but what will allow you to be able to stay in the room and to thrive in the room?
And do you think, you know, a lot of women that I will speak to will say, one of the things, and Lusanda, this is still for you. A lot of women that I speak to will say, the thing is, I'm a mother, and sometimes trying to balance my home pressures as well as my corporate, my pressures at work, sometimes it may be difficult. Do you think that you know, there are certain interventions perhaps that should be made at a workspace, or you know, in the world of corporate, to be able to assist as part of the support that you talk about, to be able to assist women to thrive in whatever responsibilities that they may have?
Definitely. I think that support is vital. I think as women, the impact on having children on our careers is huge, and support through those years is important. And a lot of people end up not staying because they think, well, it's not possible. I can't do it now that I'm a mother. And I think it's important for workplaces to give that support and show the employees that it is possible. And I think in the space that we all find ourselves in the world, with working from home, etc., you know, it shows to Ellen's space in terms of technology, and how technology can allow women through the different spaces in their journey, that they can still continue with their careers and continue to succeed in their careers with support such as technology, working from home, not being required to be in the office when you need to pick up your child from school. You know, you can pick up from school and then work from home. You don't have to pick up from school and rush back to work. So accommodating people in the different stages in their career, and it won't always be like that. Their children won't always be so small, but understanding that there are different stages in people's careers, and accommodating those different stages so that people don't have to drop off the career ladder. They can stay on the ladder and stay in and being productive and valuable in the workplace and in society at large.
And actually ensure that our you know, workspaces are truly transformed, which is a whole debate altogether. I want to encourage you, if you're watching us from whatever platform that you're watching us, as per usual, you know, you can leave your comments or ask your questions to our guests this afternoon. We'll be taking some of your questions. I see some questions have already come through, and I want to start with a question which I want to throw to Nozi. And it's a question from Bunolo. Hi, Bunolo. Thank you so much for joining us. And she says, ladies, I'd like to write a book, story about my life as a child born from an extramarital affair. I have no clue where to start. Desktop research is overwhelming. Please share some pointers. Nozi, this is literally your story.
I mean... So actually, my story also even starts there, because obviously I could not write my book without also giving notice to my mom. I was also born out of an extramarital affair, and struggling to find my place as a child born of an affair. In Xhosa we say umntana wedikazi or umntana wenkazana, meaning that they are not of the family, and the ratio in terms of the sort of things that you need, you won't be in the priority list because kaloku you're not of the marriage. And even in South African law, it's termed as a illegitimate child, which I've always had a problem with, but that's another conversation for another day. So I write all of that in the book. In terms of like just publishing a book in South Africa, it's very funny because I'm actually just publishing through my YouTube channel a video covering that. It is quite difficult. My book is self-published. So I had an option to go with a firm that does publishing, but to access that network is quite difficult. There has to be an anchor. There's a certain, angle that they want it to look like, or there's a certain strategy that they have. So it didn't really work out for me in terms of publishing through a publishing company. I had to, self-publish, meaning writing the book on my own and finding an editor. I wrote about almost 600 pages. An editor cost me about 35 Rand a page, printing costs, re-editing the book, just getting the book in a format where, it's obviously presentable. So working with a graphics designer and now printing the book as well, marketing the book as well, the distribution of the book. So the self-publishing route is definitely difficult because everything is done by you. All the orders come through me, and having to deal with all of that. But I will be covering all of that. But just for the sake of this video, it is self-published, and meaning that it was self-financed. So yeah.
Talk about marketing the book, and I think there's something quite important and fascinating, I think, that you do. In how you market. There's a way in which you tell the stories, whatever platform of yours, that actually, it kind of invite people in to be able to want to read the book. And I think perhaps for Bonolo, some advice around the marketing aspect itself. I think you probably need to be very deliberate about how you do it.
Yeah. I'll be very honest. At first, I was not. For me, I was just like telling my story, but I guess it was how relatable it was. Do you get what I mean? So whenever I talk about me writing a book, I was diagnosed HIV positive and all of that. From a surface, it always seems like, oh, it's another HIV story, right? But when you really go in deep into it, there's so many different topics that I cover. Topics about Black tax, the fact that I was the first graduate in my family, the responsibility that comes with all of that, and the challenge of being the only one that was working and being the only girl. I talk about, finding my place in a family where both my brother and I were not on marriage. So I think it's the relevance that people found in my story that even when I sign my books, every time I distribute them, I always say, may you find yourself in this book. Because there's so many different layers that I know, even if it's not the HIV story, it's going to be the Black tax. If it's not the Black tax, it's going to be, I didn't grow up with my father. If it's not that story, then it's going to be, oh, I was the only Black child in my school, in a formerly white school. Do you get what I mean? Yeah. So it really, I think what really worked for me that I've been very, very fortunate about is all my experiences, people find themselves in it. They really find themselves in it. And what I really try to be deliberate about is, I am not a writer. Let me make that clear. I wrote a book, okay? Yeah. I am a storyteller. And what I was very deliberate about was, I want to tell my story my own way. So it's the language that everyone uses. I had the option, for example, of writing my book in pure English. But when I was speaking to my editor, I was like, no, like when I talk about the conversation that my mom and I had, it has to be in Xhosa. because to get that message out, to get the emotion out, it has to be in my language. Do you get what I mean? So I think that really is what worked for me.
Ellen, I think you wanted to say something, and perhaps I cut you off.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I actually lost. I was just intrigued listening to Nozi. It was, I forget what I wanted to say, but just adding on to what you're saying, the terms like illegitimate and the wording that's used. My company is called Story Room. I work in technology and innovation. It's like people don't understand the name. The strength is in the stories. So it's not, what have I learned? What has put me at certain tables? Why have I dined with prime ministers and like gone to bathrooms because I'm at this like 7-star restaurant in Paris taking pictures for my kids? Just like, how the hell did I get here?
Like, this is
but pretending to be, pretending this is very normal. But because of stories, and I think what I'm trying to, yes, I add the tech element, because to scale, as we say, or as the world is going to continue to be, we're not going to go back to how things were. There isn't actually a post-COVID. This is life as we know it. So the power of stories, your own stories, what we learn through that, and that's why it's important that within our own culture that our parents learn to talk, that we don't talk about our cousin as being the illegitimate one or her mother. And then, our parents say things and I think, maybe 40 years ago, you also, you forget. So I think also owning that power. So when you as a woman in tech, when you're presenting a solution, you are the expert of your problems. No one can tell you what the best solution would be. You know that. So it's changing our narratives. It's being comfortable with speaking close up, because that's the only way it can be said. And that we're mindful of what we tell our daughters, but more importantly, what we tell our sons. We need to raise our sons in the way that we expect, how they treat us, and how they will not let another man or boy or uncle say anything. That is how you treat your colleague, the girl in the class, your future partner, whatever. We need to teach them. We need to actually stop talking about the girls. We need to stop talking to the boys.
I absolutely, totally agree with that. And it's something that personally I feel very passionate about. I have a son, an 11-year-old son. And I feel such, particularly in times like these, I feel such a responsibility, social responsibility, even beyond being a mother, social responsibility to teach him to be a better man, and to teach him to be very much aware, of what happens around him, but also very much aware of his contribution in what happens around him. And Lusanda, I want to bring you in here also as a, talking to you as a mother. What do you believe perhaps are some of the most important things that we should be teaching our children?
Yeah, I think the whole thing about teaching the boys resonates a lot with me. I have 2 kids, both boys, a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. And before I had them, I used to think I wanted a girl and a boy. And now that I have 2 boys, I think I really needed to have these 2 boys, because for me, the education of men and the role that men play in having an equal society is so important. It's not about women having dialogue. It's not about what women are going to do. It's about all of us. Men are very much part of the story. Men are very much part of what are you going to do to make the world a better place? How do you impact the home, the workplace, etc. So for me as a mother, the story and how I raise my boys is very important to me.
There's actually a question which has come through.
Just to even, sorry to cut you off, Nwabisa, I just want to relate the story because I thought about it just a couple of days ago. This thing I always say whenever I have such conversations is, we can never talk about gender-based violence and talk about how we can empower women in the absence of men. That will never work.
Right?
I remember particularly when I was growing up, and even like in my early teens as even a young adult, whenever I would wear particularly a dress, and my mom would be so adamant that I have to wear like tights underneath, right? Because that's how a lady should wear, what a lady should do, and particularly so that, you know, I don't attract men, or I don't, you know, attract boys and all of that. And now that I'm grown and I get to, I'm like, that was so wrong. Like, why should I, as a child, be thinking about the way I dress and all of that, and having to wear tights? And I mean, those were long tights, and I would get so, and it would be so sunny. Whether it was at school, underneath my uniform, I have to wear tights. Do you get what I mean? And so we just need to change the narrative in terms of, really, we need to focus on, oh, we have a problem with our society, blah, blah, blah. But it starts at home. It doesn't start anywhere else. It starts about how it's acceptable that, you know, my brother, for example, can use his money however way he likes, but then I want to know, like, I would anytime I would like I can use it however way, because the place of a girl in the family never ends. The responsibility never ends. No, even if you're married, I'm like, no, like that's not how it's supposed to be done. No. So definitely this whole conversation about the conversation we have with boys, with men in our society is very important.
Yeah.
I can add something quickly. Now during lockdown, we're actually playing a card game, and we're playing Crazy 8, my husband and two boys. And so they were saying, you know, we've added this thing, the king has these extra powers, so this happens and this happens. I said, oh, okay. And then what about the queen? And they're like, no, that doesn't apply to the queen. I was like, oh, no.
Oh.
to the queen. And then they're like, no, but the three of us were sitting and we agreed this. And I said, yeah, that's why. You were three guys in the room. You all agreed on how the king is going to do this. This is exactly why we need diversity, because you were three men in a room, and it made sense to the three of you that the king should have these extra powers. If you had a woman when this discussion happened in the first place, then you would have a different voice and a different perspective. So for me, that whole thing about diversity and different perspectives and different voices, you're not going to hear different ideas if you keep asking people who look the same
people.
You know,
Nwabisa?
ladies, yes, Ellen.
Sorry, this is, just sorry for interrupting you, but I just love what the ladies are saying. I think it also something that in the years that I've matured, that I've also become milder in, is understanding. I'm sticking up for men here because I see that with my own son as well. We also have this responsibility as women to explain to them. So I think besides only educating girls and saying, wear your tackies, don't hang on the swings like that, all these things I heard as well, you know, your dress is going to go up, and the guy seemingly has no power in all of this, you know, you can't fault him for what then happens. I think sometimes we scare men as well, is because like we're seen as strong women, and I'm seen as a very difficult woman, to help them understand why sometimes this extremity is required, or while I feel I need to speak louder or make sure, it's because otherwise I'm not heard, but also invite them into our world and how they can communicate. So yes, the guys need to be involved, because otherwise all of this is pointless. They're still the decision makers, and men will, and it's not that we don't want men or anything like that, but secondly, we also have a responsibility to teach them, us as partners, as women, as mothers, as colleagues, and to say, I understand that's a joke, but do you know that it's actually, when a guy says something like that and you're in the boardroom, it gives you a yucky feeling. I'm at the age now where I'm like, and well, I actually say, you know, like, okay, yes, it doesn't happen anymore, but like, and you are asking me why to pour the tea. But yes, before 15 years ago, you know, I just like, okay, because I don't want to, you know, I don't want to cause trouble, and it's just pouring tea, and don't be difficult. I don't want to be that girl. But now I take great offense. Why are you asking me?
There's a question I actually want to ask, and I'll pose it to all three of you. And it's really about, I think it was sparked by something Nozi said, you know, when your mom told you wear tights and etc. There are certain things that particularly mothers, so there are some things that we do, you know, etc., that really come from a place of fear, that even though we may not necessarily know it and kind of articulate it, but they really are driven by fear rather than the desire to empower. And how do we change that? We've all kind of come out. That's how our parents have always been, to us. Obviously, not all of them. But how do we ensure that these generations, our generation, kind of going forward, we flip the script on fear basically and become even more empowering. To any of you.
I think for me personally, when I look at my upbringing, the fear came because there was no room or an opportunity to discuss where the fear comes from. So my mom was scared, but then that's it. You do not have a conversation of, this is why I'm scared, this is what is happening, because we come from a generation where you don't talk about these things. Right. One of the reasons that I was so scared to disclose about my HIV status to my mom was because we've never had a serious conversation about, okay, just tell me how you feeling, what is happening and all of those things. It has always been about, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. So I think it actually starts from that point of view of we need to talk. Right. And I've had the need to be very conscious of reminding myself of that, because the danger of coming from an environment that was that is that you also tend to, even though you don't want to, you tend to repeat history. You tend to also shy away from conversations. You tend to also shy away from speaking your mind because you come from an environment or an upbringing that did not do that, right? So having conversation, even if it's with your partner, even if it's at work, what do you feel? I'm actually feeling this way. This is my opinion, and actually not even being apologetic about that. So I really, as I said, from my experience, I think the fear came from, I don't want to, we can't talk about this because it's not something that's really being talked about.
Yeah. So ladies, this is a really, really interesting conversation for me. So we've got about 12 or so minutes left, and I can see there are a lot of questions coming through, from people who are watching us. And here's what I'm going to do. I may not be able to get to all the questions, but because we're committed to actually getting them answered, this session will, as it's recorded, there'll also be a story about it on Sowetan Live, which will fly, later on in the day. And I'll make sure that some of the questions that you have asked our panelists today are answered in that story. Okay. There's a question though I do want to pose to Ellen, and Samantha is asking. Hi, Samantha. Samantha is asking, Ellen, how did you make the transition basically from social work to tech?
The short of it is that with the enormous trauma I experienced being a social worker, and it didn't work in my family. You can't run a boys' home and have a 3-year-old and 5-year-old at home, because you have 35 boys. 35 boys. You have 2, Lusanda. I had 1. I'm 35. Good Lord. With always every day it's a battle of, how do I feed this 35? How do I make sure they're not stabbing each other? How do I make sure that they're not being violent, even though.
I think Helen just muted herself. There we go.
Yeah, sorry. So how did I get into that? I think I always tell people, as a social worker, you always have to hustle. You're always looking for donations. So you're actually a natural entrepreneur, because you always have to find means and methods. And after giving up my job, because my home situation didn't allow for me to be 24/7 available for 35 boys, because my ex-husband thought that your place is at home. You can't be taking care of 35 boys. What about your own 2 children? And that sort of conflict. And I went into HR because I was already, and the transition I made was that I started doing HR in a business incubator. And that's how I learned about technology. So while I started off on the soft side, the HR skills, I came into this world that was about business and was about technology. Not at Propeller, no. That was actually at Kemen, the chemical incubator, and that's how I went on to CEDA. So I learned from the people, from the stories I heard. I Googled. I learned about this incredible world of technology and what I bring to the table, and what we bring as Africans, and especially as African women. We bring a skill, that there's no IP for. That is, it's just amazing. And if we can own, and if we can work on our strengths, and if we can have those honest conversations like Nozi spoke about, it starts with honesty. I needed to tell my kids, I'm an overprotective mother. And why was that? Because I got into situations where people were provoked. I was told. So that's why I was, and now I say, so it starts with us as women also. We just need to tell our stories, and they don't need to be blaming stories, but we need to explain to our daughters actually why we want you wearing the tights, or be aware that a man can respond that way. And to our sons say, you don't ever treat a woman like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Lusanda, I want to read a comment for you and then ask you a question kind of, about it. So somebody is saying, it's Samantha actually, she's saying your profession is very intimidating, and well done for making it big in one of the biggest law firms. Have you ever felt intimidated?
I think like when you start out, I think also because law is very male dominated, but it's very intellectual based, like there's all these very clever people. So, when you start out, it's like, wow, like these people know so much, and how do they know all of this stuff? And I'll never understand this stuff. So yes, but I think with learning and with sticking it out, you grow to understand that it's not because they were born with something that you weren't born with, that it's about experience and learning and seeing it as a long-term thing rather than a short-term thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, ladies, we've got 5 minutes left, and I really want to ask you, all of you, sort of this question. For us at the Sowetan and Sowetan Women's Club, knowing our place is really, as Miss Universe, so as it says, taking up space, owning it, and knowing that if you've got a dream and it's something that you want to do or you want to be, that you not only work hard for it, but you also open a door for other people who look like you, who may want the same dreams, to be able to occupy it. That's what, for us, knowing our place is. And I want to ask you what it is for you guys. And it may seem like a simplistic question, but I think your lives, in everything that you've done, has really been about you knowing your place, as a woman, as an activist, as a leader. And Nozi, I want to start with you. What does knowing your place mean for you?
I think it's being unapologetically myself and living my truth. I think that is what I'm reflecting, particularly on this year, the last year, really coming out with my story has really been so liberating, and owning my story. And, I get to interact with different people, talking, having different views about what all this means, but taking responsibility of like what happened. And just in a nutshell, living my truth has been so liberating for me, and unapologetically being myself. That is really taking space for me.
And Ellen?
Wow, that's actually a very difficult one to answer. I love that you say, Nozi, being unapologetically yourself. To be very honest, I think being unapologetic for me has truly only come this year. It took a pandemic for me to not try and hide my filter or apologize beforehand for my filter. I feel a responsibility. I can't explain it otherwise. I feel a responsibility because I have been silenced so many times. And I realize that you can also only be silenced if you allow people to silence you. And I also don't fit in the box that people want to put me in. So instead of spending all that energy, I bring something incredibly valuable and unique to the table. And it may not be writing code, or I may not be an auditor, or I don't know, I'm not a legal boss, you know, I'm not a partner in BOAs, but I bring my own, like Lusanda says, I bring something else to the table. I bring something else to this discussion. And the moment I decided that I'm proud of it and that I just don't fit anywhere, I don't fit anywhere. And it's the most liberating feeling ever, because I don't have to bow down for anything, actually. I fit everywhere.
Absolutely. Lusanda?
I think for me, one of the things I really believe in is making the world better because I was in it. How did I make it better because I was in it? And I try and take that everywhere, whether it's at work or it's at home or in myself as a mother, to say, how did I make it better because I was there? You know, how did I add? How did I make it a better situation, a better space? What did I add to it? How did I make it better because I was here? And I think for me, that makes my place. My place is the world. That's my place. My place is not some small little corner there for a Black girl. My place is the world.
Absolutely. I mean, right? I really do want to clap for that. Ladies, thank you so much. I really, I'm humbled. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think you guys are phenomenal women. I think in the spaces in which you operate, most definitely the world will know and will be better because you were here. And thank you for watching us. This is the Sowetan Women's Club. We want to thank our guest, Ellen Fischat, Lusanda Raphulu, and Nozibele Qamngana. Thank you so much. Look out for the story on this discussion and many more discussions to come of the Sowetan Women's Club. Thank you so much for joining us. Do know your place, and goodbye.